March 2002, The Source magazine, page 246, 17 faces staring back at you from a magazine illustration. Eminem, Biggie, Tupac, MC Hammer, Slick Rick, Dr. Dre, arranged like an artistic composition across the page. Looks like one of those greatest rappers of all time lists, right? It's not. This is a corporate org chart disguised as a cartoon. And when you follow the money, when you connect the actual business relationships between these faces, you realize something wild. Every single person in this drawing is connected by 4 executives most people have never heard of. Well, 3 of them aren't in the picture. 1 of them is. And that tells you everything about who had real power. Facelift, Episode 1, The Business Blueprint Hidden in Plain Sight. To understand what you're looking at, you gotta meet the context. This illustration appeared in The Source magazine's March 2002 issue, a retrospective called Facelift that celebrated the previous decade of hip-hop. For 12 years, from 1990 to 2002, The Source ran satirical back-page illustrations analyzing who held power in hip-hop. Not puff pieces approved by publicists. Actual political cartoon-style commentary on industry dynamics. The only visual record of hip-hop stardom that wasn't controlled by the labels. In March 2002, the magazine wanted to celebrate that legacy. So the artist did something clever. He took his old paintings, Biggie from a 1995 issue, Tupac from 1996, Jay-Z from 1998, and digitally composited them into one unified image. This isn't just collage work, this is sampling in visual form. Each face came from a specific moment in time. Biggie's portrait was painted in 1995, right when Ready to Die was changing hip-hop. Eminem's face came from 1999, the year the Slim Shady LP made Dr. Dre a kingmaker for the second time. What the artist accidentally created was a time capsule. Each face represents the exact moment that artist became undeniable to the industry. But here's what nobody noticed in 2002, and what I started obsessing over when I found this in an archive last year. These aren't just the biggest stars. They're all connected by the same business infrastructure. So I made a list, all 17 names. Eazy-E, Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Tupac, the notorious B.I.G. Puff Daddy, Jay-Z, Eminem, Master P, LL Cool, J. Redman, Slick Rick, MC Hammer, Eve, Big Pun, and Suge Knight. And I started asking, what do they all have in common? At first, I thought geography. East Coast legends, West Coast legends, blue states and red states on a hip-hop map. But that didn't work. Master P is from New Orleans. Jay-Z and Biggie are both New York, but they built completely different empires. Then I thought label affiliations. Death Row Records, Bad Boy Entertainment, Rockefeller Records, No Limit Records, Def Jam. Look at these logos on album covers. Doggy Style on Death Row, Ready to Die on Bad Boy, Reasonable Doubt on Rockefeller, Ghetto D on No Limit, Mama Said Knock You Out on Def Jam. Closer, but still not it. These labels hated each other, East versus West, Bad Boy versus Death Row, Rock A Fella versus everybody. Then I look one level deeper. Not the label on the album cover, the distributor, the company that actually got the CDs into Tower Records, Sam Goody, and Walmart. The logistics company that nobody thinks about but controls whether your album exists in the marketplace. Priority Records, a company in Los Angeles run by a guy named Bryan Turner. Picture a tree. At the roots, Priority Records, controlling West Coast distribution from the mid-1980s through the 1990s. 3 massive branches growing from those roots. Branch 1, Eazy-E's Ruthless Records. NWA's Straight Outta Compton, Easy Does It, all distributed through Priority. That's how gangsta rap reached the suburbs. Branch 2, Master P's No Limit Records, the entire southern hip-hop empire, Ice Cream Man, Ghetto D, every album with that tank on the cover. Priority distribution made Master P a 9-figure mogul. Branch 3, Jay-Z's Rockefeller Records in its first year. Reasonable Doubt in 1996, before Def Jam, before the stadium tours, Jay-Z's debut got into stores because Priority handled distribution. 6 of the 17 faces in this drawing made their first $1 million because of one distribution deal with Bryan Turner's company. But here's where it gets wild. Remember, Suge Knight's in this drawing. He's not here as an artist. He never rapped. He's here because he was the muscle behind Death Row Records, the CEO who intimidated the industry and built an empire through sheer force of will. And Death Row, that was also distributed through Priority Records. Bryan Turner's company. The same guy distributing Eazy-E was also distributing the label that Suge Knight and Dr. Dre built after they left Eazy in a very public, very ugly split. 7 faces, all connected through one distribution pipeline that most fans never knew existed. But Priority wasn't the only ghost in this machine. Jimmy Iovine, co-founder of Interscope Records. In 1991, this guy, who'd produced albums for Bruce Springsteen and produced records for decades, decided to bankroll Death Row with a distribution deal. That gave us Snoop Dogg, Tupac, and made Knight a millionaire. Look at these album covers, Doggy Style, the Interscope logo right there. All Eyes on Me, Death Row and Interscope together in the small print nobody reads. When Death Row collapsed in violence and bankruptcy, when Knight went to prison, Jimmy backed Dr. Dre's Aftermath Entertainment. That's how we got Eminem. The Slim Shady LP, Aftermath, Interscope, Dr. Dre executive producing the resurrection of his own career. So Jimmy funded both sides of the Death Row story. The rise with Tupac and Snoop, the resurrection through Dre and Eminem. 4 faces, Snoop, Tupac, Dre, Eminem, plus Suge Knight as the executive caught in between. While Priority controlled the West Coast and Iovine built the Interscope empire, the East Coast split between 2 executives most fans have never heard of. Lyor Cohen, president of Def Jam Recordings from 1988 to 2004. LL Cool J was already a star when Cohen arrived, but Cohen turned him into a franchise. Mama Said, Knock You Out, multiple platinum albums, movie career. Slick Rick signed in 1988. Cohen helped make Children's Story, a cultural phenomenon that still gets referenced today. Redman came up under Cohen's watch in the early 90s with What the Album, and Clive Davis, president of Arista Records, the legendary executive who'd worked with everyone from Aretha Franklin to Whitney Houston. In 1993, Puff Daddy was a 23-year-old A&R fired from Uptown Records. He wanted to start his own label. Nobody would fund him except Clive Davis, who gave Bad Boy a distribution deal through Arista. Without Clive Davis, there's no Bad Boy. Without Bad Boy, there's no Biggie, no Puff as a mogul, and arguably no Jay-Z taking notes on how to build Rockefeller the same way. That's 5 more faces directly connected through Def Jam and Arista's East Coast distribution infrastructure. Now let's account for the outliers. MC Hammer was on Capitol Records, distributed by EMI. Totally different ecosystem from the rap infrastructure we've been mapping. But Hammer proved in 1990 that rap could sell 33 million records with Please Hammer Don't Hurt 'Em. That's what made Jimmy Iovine start Interscope in the first place. Hammer opened the door, everyone else walked through it. Eve came up through Rough Riders and Interscope. There's the Iovine connection again with Let There Be Eve. And Big Pun was on Loud Records, distributed by RCA, but discovered through terror squad's underground network with capital punishment. Different paths, but all of them still relied on the same four executives and the distribution infrastructure they built in the early 90s. 17 faces, four executives behind the scenes. Bryan Turner at Priority, Jimmy Iovine at Interscope, Lyor Cohen at Def Jam, Clive Davis at Arista, and one executive, Suge Knight, who fought his way into the picture. Look at what they understood that most people miss. They didn't need to own the artists. They just needed to control how the music reached the people. Picture the supply chain in 1995, vinyl records and CDs pressed in a factory, shipped in cardboard boxes to a distribution warehouse, then sent to every Tower Records and Sam Goody in America. The artist might own the master recording. Master P kept his masters, Jay-Z kept his publishing, Eazy-E owned Ruthless Records. But if they couldn't get their CD onto a store shelf in 1995, they couldn't sell records. That's power, not ownership, distribution. The executives who controlled distribution in the 90s controlled everything. The artists who understood this, who negotiated better distribution deals, who built relationships with these four men, those are the artists who became moguls. Well, now here's the twist. Everything I just showed you, the distribution chokehold that made these four men invisible kingmakers, it's dying. By 2030, industry analysts predict 1.15 billion people will pay for streaming subscriptions directly. No Tower Records, no Sam Goody, no Priority Records middleman. A teenager in Lagos streams a new artist from Atlanta directly to her phone. An engineer in Singapore creates a playlist that generates royalties in real time. No warehouse, no trucker hauling boxes of CDs across the country. No retail buyer at Walmart deciding which albums make it to the shelves. The infrastructure these four executives controlled, it becomes irrelevant when the artist uploads directly to Spotify, and every human with internet access can discover it instantly. Traditional music distributors held 85% of market power in 2002. By 2030, they're projected to control just 8%. Spotify and Apple Music, the companies that replaced the old gatekeepers, are projected to lose 14% of their control by 2030 as direct artist-to-fan platforms and blockchain distribution emerges. The power structure these four men built took 20 years to dominate the industry. It'll take less than that for artists to take it back. Back to 2002. Back to Suge Knight. Master P kept his masters. Jay-Z kept his publishing. Eazy-E owned Ruthless Records. But every single one of them needed distribution to get their music into stores. And Suge understood this so well, he forced his way into the art. He's the only executive in this drawing because he understood something the others didn't. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. The other executives, Bryan Turner, Jimmy Iovine, Lyor Cohen, Clive Davis, they were comfortable being invisible. They got rich without fame. They controlled the infrastructure without needing their faces on album covers. But Suge wanted to be seen. He wanted his name in the credits, his face at the war shows, his reputation preceding every negotiation. That visibility gave him power, but it also made him a target. You can't be investigated by the FBI if nobody knows who you are. You can't go to prison for industry practices if you're not the public face of those practices. The invisible executives retired rich. Suge Knight is serving 28 years in prison. But there's still someone missing from this drawing. Someone who built an empire without Priority, without Interscope, without any of these distribution deals. Jay Prince built Rap-A-Lot Records in Houston with true independence. Russell Simmons co-founded Def Jam, but somehow isn't here. Birdman built Cash Money Records in New Orleans and negotiated the greatest distribution deal in hip-hop history, keeping ownership while getting Universal's resources. The source was a New York magazine. This drawing has East Coast bias, West Coast bias. It's missing the South, missing the independent executives who said, I don't need your system. And in episode 6, we're going to add the face that should have been here all along. The one who proved you could win without the machine. When this illustration was created in 2002, the artist probably just thought he was making a cool retrospective, a celebration of the decade's biggest stars arranged in one visual composition. But what he actually did was document the invisible empire. The executives nobody interviews, the distribution deals nobody writes about, the infrastructure that made billion-dollar careers possible, and the one guy who fought to be visible. Next episode, we're meeting the first ghost, the man who sold NWA to the world using the same tactics he learned selling disco compilations. The Priority Record Story. Bryan Turner's blueprint for distributing gangsta rap to suburban teenagers while the major labels were too scared to touch it. Leave a comment, subscribe, more on the way.